Last time I looked at the world religions and showed why Christianity must be the one true religion. But that still leaves an open question. Which branch of Christianity is true? So let's take a look. There are major theological differences, but the main one I think that we should focus on first is the authority. 50% of Christians are Catholic and 50% are not. And the main difference between them is the papacy. So let's take a look at that. Now I'm going to be honest, at some point in my life I left my faith. And when I came back, I was thinking about which branch to join. I asked this question myself. But my answer was very short and, quite frankly, uneducated. I just thought Peter was the rock, therefore Catholicism. So now I decided to take another look at this, and this is what I found. The most important thing, first of all, is Peter's primacy. So just to be clear, even if Peter had primacy, doesn't necessarily mean that there should be a pope right now. It also depends on Peter's authority and the different types of governance. Was there an apostolic succession? But I think this is the first thing that we should look at. Did Peter have primacy? And what does that mean? So I gathered some Bible verses and some church father quotes that I think are relevant to this topic. First of all, let's take a look at some of the Bible verses. We have three main ones. Matthew 16-18, you are Peter, and on this rock, the classic one. If Peter is the rock, then Peter has the primacy, and also this involves Peter being granted the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Second one, strengthen your brothers, Luke 22:32. This happened during the Last Supper when the apostles argued over who is the greatest. Jesus gave them an explanation that the one who serves is the greatest, and then he told Peter to strengthen his brothers after he comes back from his failure. And finally we have John 21:16 or 15-17. Take care of my lambs, repeated 3 times, which reflects Jesus' prediction that Peter will reject Jesus 3 times, and it tells him specifically to take care of his sheep, which reflects his message to strengthen his brothers. So let's take a look at the first one. The rock. This is what we will start with first. So there is a couple of semantic issues to take care of. So first of all, Petros and Petra. Starting here, Petros could mean small rock, while Petra means foundation. And this is affirmed because Petra is only used as a foundation or a big rock in the Bible. However, Petros is only used as Peter's name in the Bible. It is never used as a big rock or a small rock. It's just used as Peter. Which brings into the question if really there is a distinction between the Petros and Petra. And now, maybe I should explain why is this distinction important. Some Protestants claim that the Petros and the Petra distinction is important because it shows a contrast, that Peter is a small rock and not the big rock. He's not the foundation. But there is a potential alternative explanation because Petros is masculine and Petra is feminine. And what does that mean? Well, Peter couldn't very well be named like Patricia, could he? He would be the laughing stock. He couldn't be the leader of the church if he was named Patricia. That just couldn't work. But then the question is, why didn't Jesus use Petros twice? And that is because he wanted to emphasize the foundation aspect. Yes, if you just take a look at these words, they're so similar. It's Petros and Petra. It's literally just 1 or 2 letter difference. But Petra is used to emphasize the foundation, and Petros was just used to make sure that Peter is not a laughingstock. And this is affirmed further in John 1:42. You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas. Now, the original Aramaic name is Kepha, which is the same as both Petros and Petra. Now, this is significant because this is more or less what Jesus would have said to Peter. And I tell you that you are Kepha, and on this Kepha I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it. And I am not the only one who thinks this. There are some Protestant scholars who agree with this. There is no major distinction between Petros and Petra. And we know this because John tells us. Like some people say that, yes, but the Greek is inspired, so we have to look at the differences. But the Greek in John 1:42 is also inspired, and John tells us that the Aramaic is the one that is important here. What I really don't like about the Greek is inspired argument is that it equates the scripture with the interpretation of the scripture. What the scripture says is indeed inspired, but your explanation is not. So just saying that the Greek is inspired doesn't give you any more credence than it does to me or any Catholic, because I could just as well say that John 1:42 is inspired. So just remember, what is inspired is, you are Simon, son of John, you will be called Cephas. My explanation or your explanation, they are not inspired. That is inspired, not our explanation. So I think it's safe to say that the Petros and Petra distinction are simply irrelevant. Now let's take a look at the next one. Even if Peter is the rock, is it this rock? Is it the same? Because this could refer to three different things. It could refer to Peter, it could refer to Peter's confession, and it could refer to Jesus. Now, here is the important part. So the name Kepha is directly related to Petros and Petra are in the same sentence. This is the first point, right? Peter's name is Kepha, so this, because it's the same and is the same in the same sentence, it makes really no sense to say that it is Peter's confession, because Peter's confession is 2 sentences prior. Now, just to be clear, the Catholic Church does allow all three interpretations. However, what it doesn't allow is to say that Peter is definitely not the rock. So if we just take a look at the whole, if I just go back up here, take a look. This is where Peter is called the rock. And I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. It's all the way down here. Now, where does Peter confess? Peter confesses all the way up here. You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God. This is 2 sentences prior. Why would this refer to 2 sentences prior, where you literally have Peter, meaning Kepha, in the exact same sentence? So I do not think that that is a very good argument. Now, next, what I would like to see is, could it be Jesus? Well, technically, yes. So just to be clear, Catholics don't believe that Peter is greater than Jesus or even equal to Jesus. Jesus is the final cornerstone upon which the entire church is built, but on top of that cornerstone, there is the foundation, that is Peter. But it doesn't make sense for Jesus to be referring to himself here, and the reason for that can be found here again. This is a threefold blessing. Jesus talks to Peter, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah." Yes. And then he says, "And I tell you, I will give you the keys." He's continuously referring to Peter. Why would he suddenly change and start talking about himself and then go back to talking about Peter? It just doesn't make much sense to me. Yes, Jesus is the ultimate foundation of the church, but Peter is the foundation above that, and it would make no sense to me for Jesus to refer to himself in this sentence. So I think it is pretty safe to say that Peter is what this refers to. Now, a very relevant, important part that follows up from this is who has the keys. And this is what the passage says. Matthew 16:19, "I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." So Peter is receiving the keys to the kingdom of heaven. That seems quite significant. It would make sense if Peter is the foundation of the church, he has the keys to the church. A relevant passage is Matthew 18:18, and it starts talking about sin, and then it tells to all the apostles, "Truly I tell you, whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven." So do all the apostles have the keys? Well, not exactly. Only Peter seems to get the keys, and here is why. I've put the 2 passages side by side, Matthew 16:19 and Matthew 18:18. "I will give you, singular, the keys of the kingdom of heaven." And this is the common part. Whatever you, singular, bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you, singular, loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. Now, to the apostles, the unique thing here is just truly I tell you. So it doesn't really have any meaning. The major difference between these two is that it changes from singular to plural, and that it is lacking the keys. The keys are only given to Peter. So how could it be? How could the apostles have the power to bind and loose, just like Peter, without the keys? Isn't that what the keys mean? Well, they can do that, but only in communion with Peter. Peter has the keys, they have the power, just like Peter does, but they have to get his keys to do that. First of all, Peter was first and singled out. Why didn't just Jesus say this to everyone? And also, Peter gets renamed. Only Peter gets a new name. Jesus didn't give anybody else a new name. Jesus talked to the apostles as a collective. He singled Peter out, and he gave him a new name that is reflective of the foundations of the church. It is significant. So it is quite clear that Peter is the one that has the keys. Not all the apostles have the keys, which is just a further confirmation that Peter is indeed the rock. And now let's take a look at the meaning, because the meaning is important. It's not just the semantics. The semantics are the semantics, but the meaning has to make sense too, right? So first of all, there is a very interesting structure that Jimmy Akin has noticed. Threefold blessing. First, there is the proclamation, and then there is a two-part explanation. Jesus replied, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah." Second blessing, "And I tell you, you are Peter." And third blessing, "I will give you the keys to the kingdom of heaven." And they are explained by what? "For this was not revealed to you by flesh and blood, but by my Father." That is why Peter is blessed. Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. That is what the keys mean. This is the power of the keys. So, what does Peter mean? Well, it is explained right here. "And on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of Hades will not overcome it." That is what Peter means. It is extremely clear that Peter is the rock. He has the keys, and he is the leader of the apostles. And oops, I made a small mistake here. Let me just quickly move this here. I do have to backtrack just a little bit. Yeah, let's just do it this way. So just to go back quickly onto the keys, why does Peter receive the keys? Well, what do the keys mean specifically? Jesus is actually referring to an event that happened in the prophecy of Isaiah. "I will place on his shoulder the key to the house of David." This is Isaiah 22:22. What he opens, no one can shut, and what he shuts, no one can open. Does that sound familiar? Whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. It is referring to precisely this passage. So what happens during Isaiah 22:22? Well, Peter is equivalent to Eliakim, who is replacing Hebna. And the Hebna was the high priest of the time, and Jesus came down on earth. He didn't like the way things were going with the Jewish people, so he established a new head of the church. Just like Eliakim replaced Hebna, Peter is replacing the new high priest. This is what the keys mean, which is further evidence of Peter's primacy. Now, what people like to point out is that immediately after Peter receives the keys, Jesus tells him, "Get behind me, Satan." Well, let's just put it this way. Peter is definitely not perfect. This is not the first time Peter did something wrong. It is not the last time he's going to do something wrong. And Peter is definitely not perfect. But did Jesus take away his authority? "You're not the rock, I'm taking your name back. I'm taking the keys away from you, I'm going to give it to somebody else." No, he doesn't say it to anyone. Even in today's times, the Pope can be criticized. The Pope can make mistakes, and they do make mistakes. Believe me, they make many mistakes. So this is not a point against Peter's leadership. So that was Matthew 16:18. Let's move on to the next one. Luke 22:32. Strengthen your brothers. Let's take a look at this. The most important part is the context. Luke 22:24. A dispute arose among them as to which of them was considered to be the greatest. That is the context for the entire discussion. So how does Jesus reply? First of all, Jesus gives an explanation what not to be like. The kings of the Gentiles lord it over them, and those who exercise authority over them call themselves benefactors. But you are not to be like that. So he's telling them not to be like the kings of the day. What to be like? Instead, the greatest among you should be like the youngest, and the one who rules like the one who serves. Notice what he's doing here. He's, instead of telling the apostles to take from others for themselves, is to give, is to be in a life of service. What Jesus is not doing is he's not flattening the hierarchy. He's not saying there is no greatest. Nowhere in this text does Jesus say that. For who is greater, the one who is at the table or the one who serves? Is it not the one who is at the table? But I am among you as the one who serves. Is Jesus not greater than the apostles? Well, of course he is. He is the ultimate servant. He is the servant of God prophesied by Isaiah. And servitude is supposed to be the way the new hierarchy is structured. Basically, this is how it was supposed to be like from the very beginning, except that people mess it up and turn it on its head. So Jesus is restoring the proper order. And the proper order is a hierarchy of servitude. So now let's take a look at the authority. What is Jesus saying? You are those who have stood by me in my trials, and I confer on you a kingdom. Not a democracy, not an anarchy, a kingdom. Just as my Father conferred one on me, so that you may eat and drink at my table in my kingdom and sit on thrones, judging the 12 tribes of Israel. Does this sound like a flat hierarchy to you? It doesn't to me. So this is the explanation. Here is the proclamation. As soon as Jesus says this, who does he turn to? Does he turn to John? Does he turn to James? Does he turn to any other apostle? No, he turns to Peter. It is still in the same context. Who is the greatest? This is not a new context. It is not a completely new discussion. This is the same part of the same context. Look, Simon, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you all as wheat. What does this mean? Some people think that this is talking about Peter. It's not. It's talking about all the apostles. The you here is plural. Satan wants to divide up the church. This is the context of the discussion. Who is the greatest? They already started arguing. And arguments like this can lead to division. And Jesus doesn't want division. So this is an affirmation that this is the same context. What does he tell Peter? But I have prayed for you, Simon, that your faith may not fail. Did he pray for John? No. Did he pray for Thomas, who doubted? No. Did he pray for any other apostle? No. For Peter. Only for Peter, and specifically for Peter. He named him right here, Simon. And when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. Now, why is this important? Jesus just said that who serves is the greatest. And now he's asking Peter to serve the apostles. Now, if Peter serves the rest of the apostles, if he strengthens them, then that makes him at the highest position of the servitude hierarchy. But the next context is also really important. Look at what Peter replies. Lord, I am ready to go with you to prison and to death. And Jesus answers him, I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times that you know me. Jesus knew this was going to happen, and he knew this was going to happen even if he told him. So what's up with this prayer? Did Jesus pray for no reason at all? Did Jesus pray knowing that the prayer would fail? Can God's prayer fail? No, that doesn't make any sense. And the context is here. And when you have turned back, Jesus is not praying for Peter not to fail 3 times. Jesus is praying for him to strengthen his brothers after he turns back. He expects him to fail, and then he prays for him so that from that moment on, his faith will not fail ever again. And therefore, Peter is to be the greatest servant. Now, the important part comes next, because it's a direct continuation of what just happened. John 21:16, take care of my lambs. So this is the context. This is post the resurrection. Peter has already failed 3 times. He has denied Jesus. And this is the final verse. 21:25 is the final verse. So John's 15-17 is almost at the very end. This is like the conclusion of the entirety of the Gospels. That is the context for John 21:15-17. The important thing to note here is that Jesus told Peter to feed his lambs, take care of his sheep, and feed his sheep. He said it 3 times, and he again singled out Peter. Notice how it's happening over and over again. Jesus singled out Peter when he named him the rock, when he gave him the keys. He singled him out when he told him to strengthen his brothers and when he specifically prayed for him. And now he singled him out when he told him to take care of his sheep. And here is the fulfillment of the promises to Peter. If you looked at the previous passages, Jesus used the future tense. He said, I will give you the keys. First of all, Matthew 18, and I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church. And then now Luke 22, and when you have turned back, strengthen your brothers. So again, this is about the future. I tell you, Peter, before the rooster crows today, you will deny me 3 times. And this is where Peter denies him later in Luke 22. Woman, I don't know him. Man, I am not. Man, I don't know what you're talking about. Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. So that was his denial. And now we come to John 21:15. Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And these refers to the apostles. Peter answers, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Once. Feed my lambs. A second time. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Take care of my sheep. The second time. And third time. Simon, son of John, do you love me? Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. Feed my sheep. This is all in present tense. This is where the church is fully established. Peter has the keys now. He has the authority. He is to guide the whole flock of the church. He has been restored 3 times. That reflects his threefold rejection of Jesus. And this is the end of the Bible. This is where the church begins. So when Jesus tells Peter 3 times to take care of his sheep, this refers to him strengthening his brothers. He is supposed to strengthen everyone and lead the entire church. Therefore, Peter definitely has the primacy. And all of that you can see just from the Bible. But what about the early church? What did the early church fathers have to say? Do we have any credible references? Well, I think we do. Let's take a look at the first one. We have Pope Clement, the 4th Pope of the Catholic Church. He was ordained directly by Peter. Now, who is this Clement? You can find him in Philippians 4:3. Yes, and I know you, my true companion, help these women since they have contended at my side in the cause of the gospel, along with Clement and the rest of the co-workers, whose names are in the book of life. So Clement is mentioned in the Bible, and we know he is in the book of life. Now, he doesn't directly say that he's the Pope, because most people don't talk about themselves, but instead we can see this in his authority. So, just to give you some context, this is a letter to the Corinthians, again, because they have rejected some bishops, and Pope Clement wasn't very happy about that. So this is what he says: accept our counsel and you will have nothing to regret. If anyone disobey the things which have been said by him, meaning God, through us, that you must reinstate your leaders, let them know that they will involve themselves in transgression and in no small danger. Now, this is very authoritative. So while it doesn't directly say that, I am the Pope, this is a different church, and Pope Clement, the Bishop of Rome, was exercising his authority. But if you don't find this particularly convincing, then take a look at the next one. Ignatius of Antioch. He's the direct student of Apostle John. Here's what he says. Ignatius, to the church which also holds the presidency in the location of the country of the Romans. So he's not talking about the Catholic Church, but he's addressing it. He's addressing the leadership right here. Still not good enough? It's still not clear enough? Well, this one will be. Take a look. Irenaeus of Lyons. He's the student of Polycarp, and Polycarp was also the student of John, just like Ignatius of Antioch. So this is just a 2nd generation bishop straight after John. But since it would be too long to enumerate in such a volume as this the succession of all the churches, we shall confound all those who in whatever manner, whether through self-satisfaction or vainglory, or through blindness and wicked opinion, assemble other than where it is proper. You cannot just assemble anywhere. You have to assemble where it is proper. By pointing out here the successions of the bishops of the greatest and most ancient church known to all. Everybody knows this church is the greatest church, is the most ancient church, founded and organized at Rome by the two most glorious apostles, Peter and Paul. So we know that Peter went to Rome, we know that Paul went to Rome, it is written right here, that the church which has the tradition and the faith which comes down to us after having been announced to men by the apostles. And here is the key part. With that church, which church? Well, the Church of the Romans, the one just mentioned. With that church, because of its superior origin, all the churches must agree, that is, all the faithful in the whole world. And it is in her that the faithful everywhere have maintained the apostolic tradition. All the faithful must agree with Rome. This was known as soon as the 1st and the 2nd century. This is a direct confirmation of the papacy. Now, is that not enough? Let's look at the 3rd century. Tertullian, he was a very influential church father, and if you know what Trinity means, it's because this guy has coined that term. Tertullian coined the term Trinity. If because the Lord has said to Peter, upon this rock I will build my church, to you have I given the keys of the heavenly kingdom, or whatsoever you shall have bound or loosed on earth shall be bound or loosed in heavens, you therefore presume that the power of binding and loosing has derived to you, that is, to every church akin to Peter. What sort of man are you, subverting and wholly changing the manifest intention of the Lord, conferring, as that intention did, this gift personally upon Peter? Who are you? Who are you to say that you have the same gift as Peter does? You don't. Peter received the keys. He is the rock. Not you, not any Orthodox church, not any Protestant church. Peter himself. On you, he says, I will build my church, and I will give to you the keys, not to the church. And whatsoever you shall have loosed or bound, not what they shall have loosed or bound. For so withal the result teaches. In Peter himself the church was reared. That is, through Peter himself essayed the keys. Well, I don't think a message could be any more clear than this. Peter is the rock, he received the keys. Yes, this is from On Modesty, chapter 21. On the difference between disciple and power and the power of the keys. Is directly addressed by one of the earliest church fathers that has coined the term Trinity. Next, Cyprian of Carthage. Again, is referring to Matthew 16 to 18, and here is the relevant part. On him, Peter, he builds the church, and to him he gives the command to feed the sheep. Remember what I told you about John? They're also relating this to the papacy. And although he assigns a like power to all the apostles, yet he founded a single chair, cathedra, and he established by his own authority a source and an intrinsic reason for that unity. And then, just a little bit lower down, if someone does not hold fast to this unity of Peter, can he imagine that he still holds the faith? So not only is he claiming that Peter is the apostle, if you don't believe that, are you still really holding to the faith? And again, in a separate letter, this is what he says. With a false bishop appointed for themselves by heretics, they dare even to set sail and carry letters from schismatics and blasphemers to the chair of Peter and to the principal church at Rome, in which sacerdotal unity has its source. So this was in reference to some heretics who have rejected Peter. Again, Firmilian, 3rd century. He is a disciple of Origen, who was a disciple of Clement of Alexandria, who was a disciple of Pantaneus, and he was a disciple of some unnamed disciples of the apostles. So again, we have a link. It's not fully clear, but we know that he is directly related to the apostles, although much later now. Pope Stephen, so that was the current pope, boasts of the place of his episcopate and contends that he holds the succession from Peter, on whom the foundations of the church were laid. Stephen announces that he holds by succession the throne of Peter. Isn't that interesting? Again, we see an affirmation of the papacy. Optatus of Milevis, 4th century. You cannot deny that you do not know that upon Peter first in the city of Rome was bestowed the episcopal cathedral, on which sat Peter, the head of all the apostles. Yes. He who shall set up a second cathedra against the unique cathedra would already be a schismatic and a sinner. You can't have a second cathedra. Now he actually lists, I'm not going to read this, but he lists all the successors to Peter. Just take a look at this list. Linus and Clement, Analectus, Evaristus, so on and so on and so on, all the way to that day. And then he says this, to Damasus Syracuse, who today is our colleague, with whom the whole world, through the intercourse of letters of peace, agrees with us in one bond of communion. Now, do you show the origin of your cathedra, you who wish to claim the Holy Church for yourselves? It is again an affirmation of the papacy. So what people like to point out is that one of the early church fathers disagreed that Peter was the rock. But I know that very frequently at a later time I so explained what the Lord said, "Thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church." That is to be understood as built upon him who Peter confessed, saying, "Thou art the Christ, the Son of the living God." And so Peter, called after this rock, represented the person of the church which is built upon this rock and has received the keys of the kingdom of heaven. For thou art Peter, and not thou art the rock, was said to him. But the rock was Christ, in confessing, whom also the whole church confesses. Simon was called Peter, but let the reader decide which of these two opinions is more probable. So first of all, he doesn't outright reject the other interpretation. He says, if you think otherwise, you're fine. You can believe that, either it is Peter's confession that is the rock, or that Peter is the rock. He doesn't see a big problem. And this is the part that most Protestants like to leave out. Why is this important? Well, you either have the Pope or you don't. If there was not supposed to be a Pope, if there was not supposed to be a successor to Saint Peter, then just imagine this church. For all these generations, there was no successor, no Pope, nobody. How would that church react to somebody who claimed primacy? Just imagine one of your churches, like if you're a Protestant or an Orthodox, imagine one bishop claiming that he is now going to be the leader of your whole church. Well, that would be a massive scandal. Could Augustine really have said, let the reader decide which of these two opinions is more probable? Could he have allowed for that if he didn't already accept the papacy? And if you notice, he also didn't reject the keys. So even if you don't think Peter is the rock, you still have the problem with the keys. And you still have the problem with Luke 22 and John 21. So this is not a very good argument against the papacy. Augustine died 1 year before the Council of Ephesus. He was invited, but he didn't make it. This is what one person at the Council of Ephesus said. Philip the presbyter and legate of the Apostolic See said, "There is no doubt, and in fact it has been known in all ages, that the holy and most blessed Peter, Prince and head of the apostles, pillar of the faith and foundation of the Catholic Church, received the keys of the kingdom from our Lord Jesus Christ, the Savior and Redeemer of the human race, and that to him was given the power of loosing and binding sins, whom down even to today and forever both lives and judges in his successors." This is 1 year after Augustine died. This was the prevalent view in the first 4 centuries. Now, can you imagine if there was no Pope, there was no successor to Peter, and what was his name? And Philip the presbyter actually said this in a council meeting with all the other bishops? This would be a massive scandal. He would be kicked out if that wasn't the case. If anybody says this and nobody rejects this, then that means this was the common view to the whole church. and to Augustine as well. This council declared that Jesus has two natures in one person, which was not accepted by the Church of the East. So, this is a very important council to all of us because we all believe that Jesus had two natures in one person. It wasn't two separate people. And it also declared that Mary is to be named Theotokos, the Mother of God. So there you go. For the first 4 centuries, right from the beginning, starting from Pope Clement in 80 AD, which is just 50 years after Jesus' death. It's so soon after his death. We have the students of the apostles, the students of the students of the apostles, 1st century, 2nd century, 3rd century, 4th century, all of them agreed with the papacy. And like I said, why is this important? Because you can't just have somebody disagreeing with this, right? You can't just have I should have done this as well. You can't just have some people agreeing, some people disagreeing, because the chair of Saint Peter is a visible chair, is down on earth. It's not some theory. Peter existed, he lived, he had a successor, and he had a successor, and you could go and you could physically meet him. So either there was a pope or there wasn't. If at least one person said that there was a pope during any of that time, it would have been considered a great heresy if there wasn't. And the opposite is also true. If there was a papacy and somebody said that there wasn't a papacy, which we have seen, then it would be condemned, and it was. So in summary, Peter definitely had the primacy according to the Bible, according to the 3 verses of Matthew, Luke and John, and Peter had the primacy according to the first 4 centuries of the Church Fathers and forever more after that, all the way until today. However, just because Peter had the primacy doesn't necessarily mean that there should be an apostolic succession. I've showed you already some quotes from Church Fathers which suggest that there should be, but I will be looking at apostolic succession sometime in the near future. And also the important part to question is what kind of authority does the chair of Saint Peter have, which is a main point of dispute between the Catholic and the Orthodox Church, because the Orthodox Church also admits that Peter had primacy. It just disagrees about what kind of primacy. So that is what I will be looking at next. If you have any questions or if you agree or disagree with anything I said, please leave a comment below and also subscribe to my channel so I can make more videos like this.